252 million years ago, the ocean went quiet, not gradually, not slowly, in what scientists now call the Great Dying, the single worst extinction event this planet has ever experienced. At least 90% of all marine species disappeared in less than 60,000 years. Ecosystems that had taken hundreds of millions of years to build were erased. The oceans became warm, starved of oxygen, and almost completely empty of life. For a brief window of time, the sea had no rulers. Then something extraordinary happened. A creature that had lived on land, that breathed air, walked on four limbs, and had no business being in the ocean, slipped beneath the surface and never came back. Within just a few million years, its descendants were already hunting in open water, and over the tens of millions of years that followed, they became something that should not have been possible. One lineage evolved eyes the size of a football, the largest eyes of any vertebrate animal that has ever lived, so powerful they could hunt in the deepest, darkest water, far beyond where sunlight could reach. Another may have grown large enough to rival the blue whale. Scientists are still debating it. They gave birth to live young, tail first, in open water, never needing to touch land again. And one fossil, buried for 180 million years, was so perfectly preserved that when scientists finally studied it, they could still read the color of its skin, a dark back, a pale belly, almost identical to a dolphin, alive today. They ruled every ocean on Earth for more than 150 million years. Then they were gone, completely, without a trace. This is the story of the ichthyosaurs, creatures that reinvented themselves from the ground up, conquered the seas, and then vanished in a way that science is still trying to explain. The sea that welcomed the first ichthyosaurs carried the memory of collapse in every current. Its waters still stretched across the planet, tides still rose and fell beneath the pull of the moon, yet the living fabric that had once filled those depths had been torn apart. Around 251.9 million years ago, Earth crossed the boundary between the Permian and Triassic periods, marking the greatest mass extinction ever known. Within less than 60,000 years, a geological heartbeat, at least 90% and perhaps as much as 96% of marine species disappeared, leaving behind an ocean transformed beyond recognition. Far to the north, across the land that would one day become Siberia, enormous volcanic eruptions broke through the crust. Layer upon layer of molten rock poured across the landscape in eruptions that continued for immense spans of time. These volcanic provinces, now known as the Siberian Traps, released staggering amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Global temperatures climbed, rainfall patterns shifted, and the chemistry of the oceans drifted into dangerous territory. As warmer water held less dissolved oxygen, entire marine regions became deprived of the oxygen many animals required to survive. At the same time, increasing acidity placed additional strain on shells, skeletons, and delicate marine organisms already struggling to endure. Life retreated from enormous portions of the sea. Broad expanses became oxygen starved dead zones where only a limited collection of hardy microbes could persist. Coral communities vanished, reef ecosystems crumbled, and countless species that had flourished for hundreds of millions of years reached their final chapter. Food webs unraveled from their foundation upward. Tiny drifting organisms declined, followed by the creatures that depended upon them, until predators themselves found little left to pursue. The familiar balance between hunter and hunted dissolved across basin after basin. Earlier oceans had been shaped by fishes, armored swimmers, and amphibian like hunters that occupied rivers, coasts, and shallow marine habitats. Many of those successful groups suffered catastrophic losses. Entire branches of evolution that had seemed firmly established faded almost completely from the record. Survival became less about dominance and more about enduring conditions that few complex animals had ever experienced. From devastation emerged an uncommon opportunity. Ecological roles that would ordinarily remain occupied for millions of years stood vacant all at once. Surface hunters had vanished, deep water predators were absent, shell crushers, swift pursuit specialists, and animals adapted to feeding by suction all left openings across the recovering ecosystem. Competition, once intense, had weakened across nearly every level of marine life. The ocean had become a place where entirely new experiments could unfold without meeting the crowded resistance that usually slows evolutionary change. This altered world became the setting in which the first ichthyosaurs entered the water. They encountered a sea still recovering from extraordinary loss, one whose communities had not yet regained their former complexity. The emptiness surrounding them was neither permanent nor lifeless. It was an interval filled with possibility, where evolution could move across open ground, shaping new forms with unusual speed as Earth's oceans began their long return toward abundance. Some chapters in Earth's history unfold across immense stretches of time, almost too gradual to notice from one generation to the next. Others arrive with astonishing speed, compressing transformations that seem impossible into an interval that barely registers on the geological calendar. The earliest history of the ichthyosaurs belongs to that second kind of story, where evolution accelerated across a landscape newly cleared of many of its former limits. For many years, paleontologists believed these marine reptiles appeared only after the Permian Triassic extinction, descending from an unidentified group of land reptiles that ventured into coastal waters once conditions began to recover. That interpretation already described one of the swiftest transitions from land to sea ever recognized among vertebrates. Within roughly 2 million years after the extinction, descendants of terrestrial ancestors had spread into marine habitats with remarkable success, acquiring bodies already suited for swimming through open water. Fresh discoveries have shifted that timeline even farther into the past. Fossils recovered from the Arctic island of Spitsbergen within the Svalbard archipelago were described in the journal Current Biology during 2023. The remains date to around 250 million years ago, close enough to the Great Extinction that they may even precede it. If that interpretation continues to withstand scientific examination, ichthyosaurs may have survived the catastrophe instead of emerging only after it. Their origin would extend into a world still belonging to the Permian, adding an entirely new beginning to their history. The fossils themselves deepen that mystery. They already display animals thoroughly committed to marine life, with skeletal features suited for efficient swimming instead of occasional visits to the shoreline. Such adaptations imply that an earlier transitional phase had already taken place before these individuals lived. Somewhere, perhaps preserved within late Permian lagoons or shallow coastal sediments, the first hesitant steps toward the sea may still rest undiscovered beneath layers of rock that have yet to reveal their contents. Evidence from the early Triassic strengthens the picture of extraordinary speed. Across an interval of only about 2 million years, paleontologists have identified 28 species of marine reptiles occupying an expanding range of ecological roles. Such diversity appearing within so brief a span has almost no equivalent elsewhere in the vertebrate fossil record. Evolution seemed to experiment freely, producing body plans that explored many different approaches to life in recovering oceans. Conditions following the extinction help explain this unusual burst of innovation. Ecological competition had weakened after so many established groups disappeared. Habitats that would normally remain occupied for immense periods now offered opportunities to newcomers. Under those circumstances, natural selection could act rapidly upon variation, favoring forms capable of exploiting food, space, and movement that had become newly available. The pace remained guided by ordinary evolutionary processes, although those processes operated across an environment unusually open to change. Each fossil discovered from this interval resembles a page recovered from a manuscript whose opening chapters remain missing. Researchers continue exploring late Permian coastal deposits, searching for the elusive ancestors that first crossed the boundary between land and sea. Their discovery would complete one of evolution's most rapid transformations, revealing how a lineage of walking reptiles entered the water and, within an astonishingly brief geological interval, became creatures whose future belonged almost entirely to the open ocean. The earliest ichthyosaurs carried the outline of an unfinished idea. Their descendants would one day glide through the sea with sleek precision. Yet these pioneers preserved traces of an older ancestry that had not entirely disappeared. Every bone seemed to record a conversation between two worlds, one left behind on land and another still taking shape beneath the waves. Among the oldest known forms were animals such as Ichthyosaurus and Grippia, inhabitants of the early Triassic seas. Their appearance differed greatly from the streamlined figures most people associate with ichthyosaurs today. Instead of a compact body tapering toward a powerful tail, they possessed long, slender trunks that recalled the flowing profile of an eel. Their heads blended into flexible necks, and the body stretched outward with proportions that suggested movement through bending and curling instead of forceful thrusts from a specialized tail. Swimming reflected this older design. Each stroke probably involved much of the body, sending waves of motion from head to tail in a continuous ripple. Modern eels and sea snakes employ a similar style of locomotion, allowing flexibility to provide propulsion. Later, ichthyosaurs would abandon this approach almost entirely, concentrating their power near the rear of the body while keeping the front comparatively stable. These first forms had not yet reached that stage. Their entire frame remained an active participant in every movement through the water. The limbs revealed another chapter still in progress. Although adapted for life at sea, they retained proportions that hinted at walking ancestors. The bones had shortened and broadened, forming structures useful for steering and balance, although they still resembled altered legs more than the broad paddle flippers that later generations would possess. Each joint reflected gradual modification instead of complete redesign, preserving an anatomy that had not entirely surrendered its terrestrial heritage. Their skeletons also carried subtler clues. Fossils recovered from Spitsbergen contain internal bone with a porous, sponge-like texture, unlike the dense weight-bearing skeleton expected in animals living entirely on land. Such bone is consistent with creatures spending much of their lives swimming through marine environments, where buoyancy reduced the need for heavy support. At the same time, these skeletons lacked several refinements seen in later ichthyosaurs, suggesting an existence balanced between familiar habits and newly acquired abilities. One feature remained especially absent. There was no tall dorsal fin rising from the back, nor the crescent-shaped tail that would eventually become one of the defining signatures of the group. Those structures had yet to evolve. Propulsion depended upon a long, flexible body working together with an unspecialized tail, producing a style of swimming suited to an evolutionary experiment still unfolding. These animals occupied an uncommon place within the fossil record. Transitional species are often difficult to recognize because evolution leaves relatively few snapshots between major transformations. Early ichthyosaurs preserve one of those uncommon intervals with remarkable clarity. Their bodies display a lineage still rearranging itself, testing new proportions while carrying familiar features into unfamiliar surroundings. Each newly discovered specimen adds another sentence to that unfinished account. The earliest ichthyosaurs were neither fully terrestrial reptiles nor perfected marine hunters. They existed within the narrow passage between those identities, preserving the shape of evolution while it was still writing its next line. Water rewards only a narrow range of designs. Every creature that attempts to move swiftly through the open sea encounters the same invisible resistance shaped by density, pressure, and the continuous pull of drag. Whether an animal descends from fish, reptiles, or mammals, those physical laws remain unchanged. They cannot be negotiated. They can only be answered. The earliest ichthyosaurs began with bodies inherited from land-dwelling ancestors, carrying limbs meant for walking and a flexible spine suited to supporting weight against gravity. As natural selection acted across countless generations, those familiar structures were gradually reshaped into something entirely different. The transformation unfolded with remarkable speed in geological terms, compressing immense anatomical change into only a few tens of millions of years. Evolution was discovering a form that the sea had quietly favored all along. Efficient movement through open water depends upon several connected features working together. A rounded head allows water to divide smoothly around the body. A broad middle section provides space for powerful muscles and internal organs, while a narrowing rear reduces turbulence. Steering requires stable control surfaces, and propulsion works best when concentrated near the tail instead of spreading across the entire body. Every adjustment reduces wasted energy, allowing longer pursuits and greater endurance in an environment where every movement carries a cost. By the middle of the Triassic period, species such as Californosaurus displayed this new architecture with remarkable clarity. Their heads blended smoothly into streamlined bodies, removing abrupt angles that disrupted water flow. Four paddle-shaped limbs acted primarily as stabilizers and steering surfaces instead of engines for propulsion. A tall dorsal fin rose along the back, helping maintain balance during rapid swimming, while the tail developed a crescent profile capable of generating powerful forward thrust with each sweep. The flexible swimmers of earlier ages had become efficient cruisers built for sustained speed. None of these innovations came from imitation. No earlier marine reptile possessed this arrangement of fins, tail, and body proportions. Ichthyosaurs arrived at the solution independently, beginning with terrestrial anatomy and gradually refining it into one of the most efficient forms ever produced by vertebrate evolution. Their success demonstrates that similar environmental demands can guide unrelated lineages toward strikingly similar destinations, even when they begin from completely different starting points. Evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould regarded ichthyosaurs as his favorite illustration of this phenomenon, known as convergent evolution. He admired how a reptile returning to the sea evolved both a dorsal fin and a crescent tail in precisely the locations where water movement made those structures most effective. The resemblance to dolphins arose across an evolutionary gulf spanning roughly 160 million years, yet both groups reached nearly the same engineering solution while sharing no marine ancestor. Whales and dolphins later traveled a comparable path, requiring tens of millions of years to reshape walking mammals into oceanic specialists. Ichthyosaurs achieved a similar transformation within a comparable span, although they began with reptiles instead of mammals. Such parallel histories suggest that large, air breathing predators moving through open water encounter only a limited number of successful designs. The streamlined body, powerful tail, stabilizing fins, and paddle like limbs emerge repeatedly because the ocean continually favors those forms, allowing physics to guide evolution toward familiar answers across distant ages. Size usually arrives late in evolutionary history. Many animal lineages spend tens of millions of years refining their bodies before producing truly gigantic forms. The ichthyosaurs followed a different path. Almost as soon as they established themselves in recovering seas, one branch expanded to astonishing proportions, reaching dimensions that would seem improbable for an animal whose ancestors had only recently abandoned life on land. Around 247 million years ago, roughly 3 million years after the Great Extinction reshaped marine life, an immense predator cruised through a tropical sea, covering what is now the state of Nevada in the United States. At that time, the deserts and mountains familiar today did not exist. Warm ocean water stretched across the region, creating an environment rich with marine life. From sediments preserved there, paleontologists uncovered the remains of a remarkable species named Symbospondylus youngorum, formally described in scientific literature during 2021. The animal measured about 17 meters, which is about 56 feet, placing it alongside the length of a modern humpback whale. Such dimensions appeared with astonishing speed. Among vertebrates, very few groups evolved giant body size so rapidly after their origin. The interval separating the first marine ichthyosaurs from an animal of this scale occupies only a brief span on Earth's geological calendar, revealing how swiftly opportunity can reshape the course of evolution. Its appearance differed noticeably from the streamlined forms that would later dominate Jurassic oceans. Symbospondylus possessed an elongated body, a lengthy skull, and jaws lined with strong pointed teeth suited for grasping substantial prey. Its profile retained much of the stretched appearance seen in earlier ichthyosaurs, although magnified to extraordinary scale. It was a hunter built for power, moving through the sea with a body that reflected an earlier stage of ichthyosaur evolution while already achieving enormous size. A study published during 2021 in the journal Science explored how such growth became possible so soon after the mass extinction. Recovering oceans contained abundant food resources that had become available as ecosystems rebuilt themselves. Ammonites flourished in great numbers, joined by fishes and other marine reptiles. Large predators, capable of exploiting these expanding food supplies, remained comparatively uncommon. Symbospondylus entered an ecosystem where plentiful prey could support exceptional body size without facing the intense competition that usually limits rapid expansion among apex hunters. Growing larger also carried important advantages. A massive body stored energy efficiently, allowed greater travel across open seas, and reduced vulnerability to smaller predators. Increased size opened access to prey unavailable to smaller hunters, creating opportunities that reinforced further evolutionary success. Once those ecological conditions aligned, natural selection favored individuals capable of reaching greater dimensions with each passing generation. The discovery of this immense reptile also transformed understanding of Triassic ecosystems. It demonstrated that marine food webs recovered far more rapidly than researchers had once believed. producing a predator 17 meters long, which is about 56 feet, required an extensive network of productive organisms beneath it, extending from microscopic plankton through fishes, ammonites, and intermediate hunters. Such complexity could arise only after marine communities had regained remarkable vitality. Symbospondylus established a pattern that echoed throughout the history of ichthyosaurs. Whenever changing environments created new ecological possibilities, this lineage responded with unusual speed. Their rise to giant size became one of the earliest demonstrations that the recovering seas rewarded innovation with extraordinary opportunity, allowing reptiles that had only recently entered the water to become rulers of an ocean still rebuilding itself. A successful design rarely remains unchanged when opportunity surrounds it. Once the ichthyosaurs established themselves across recovering seas, their shared body plan began branching into an extraordinary range of lifestyles. Within a comparatively brief span of geological history, close relatives spread through the ocean in directions so different that they came to resemble an entire community of hunters instead of a single family of reptiles. Research published in Nature Communications during 2020 revealed that this expansion followed what evolutionary biologists describe as an early burst pattern. Soon after their origin, ichthyosaurs generated an exceptional variety of body forms and feeding strategies before their rate of innovation gradually settled. Such explosive diversification appears when numerous ecological opportunities become available at once, allowing natural selection to favor many different solutions simultaneously instead of forcing species into direct competition for the same resources. Some ichthyosaurs specialized as pursuit predators. Their jaws carried sharp, narrow teeth with finely serrated edges that gripped slippery prey with remarkable efficiency. Swift fishes and fast swimming cephalopods became their primary targets. Their streamlined bodies and powerful swimming abilities allowed them to chase agile animals through open water, where speed determined success far more often than brute strength. Other members of the group adopted a completely different approach. Their teeth became shorter, broader, and more rounded, forming durable, crushing surfaces capable of breaking armored prey. Ammonites, protected by tightly coiled shells, represented a dependable source of food for these specialists. Hard-shelled marine invertebrates that resisted the bites of slender-toothed hunters became valuable meals for reptiles equipped with stronger jaws and reinforced dentition. Among the most unusual forms stood Shastosaurus, whose skull departed dramatically from earlier ichthyosaurs. Fossil evidence suggests this giant possessed little or no functional dentition during adulthood. Instead of seizing prey with rows of teeth, it may have generated powerful suction within its mouth, drawing soft-bodied squid inward through rapid expansion of the throat and jaw. Modern marine mammals, such as beaked whales, demonstrate that suction feeding can become an efficient hunting strategy in deeper waters, offering an illuminating comparison for understanding this remarkable reptile. Body size also expanded across an astonishing range. Some species measured only about 1 meter, which is about 3 feet, living alongside relatives exceeding 15 meters, which is about 49 feet. Tiny hunters occupied ecological roles requiring agility and rapid reproduction, while enormous forms traveled through broader hunting grounds, supported by abundant prey. These contrasting lifestyles existed within the same oceans and often during the same intervals of geological time, revealing how thoroughly ichthyosaurs divided available resources among themselves. Such diversity within a single lineage illustrates adaptive radiation, the process through which one ancestral group rapidly evolves into many specialized descendants. A comparable pattern later occurred among mammals after the extinction of non avian dinosaurs, when surviving species expanded into ecological roles left vacant across the continents. The ichthyosaurs accomplished something strikingly similar much earlier, although their stage was the recovering sea instead of the land. The unusual conditions following the Permian extinction created this evolutionary freedom. Marine ecosystems had lost occupants across nearly every level of the food web, leaving opportunities for predators, shell crushers, deep water specialists, and giant cruisers alike. Each vacant role encouraged another experiment in anatomy and behavior, allowing close relatives to diverge without exhausting one another's resources. By the late Triassic period, that remarkable diversification had reshaped the world's oceans. Ichthyosaurs no longer represented a single successful species or even a handful of similar reptiles. They had become the dominant vertebrate predators across every major ocean basin, filling ecological roles with a breadth that few animal groups have ever matched. There comes a point when ordinary comparisons begin to lose their meaning. An animal can become so immense that familiar scales no longer help describe it. During the late Triassic, certain ichthyosaurs crossed that threshold, expanding beyond the dimensions expected of marine reptiles and approaching the greatest sizes ever achieved by vertebrate life. One of the earliest discoveries to reveal this astonishing scale emerged from the Looning Formation of Nevada in the United States. Beginning in 1954, paleontologist Charles Camp led excavations that uncovered an extraordinary concentration of fossils. Over the years, researchers recovered 37 individuals belonging to Shonosaurus populares, making the site one of the richest ichthyosaur localities ever found. Today, that remarkable deposit is preserved within Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park, where the fossils remain a testament to the immense reptiles that once crossed a tropical sea covering the region. Shonosaurus popularis reached lengths of approximately 13.5 to 15 meters, which is about 44 to 49 feet. Estimates suggest body masses between 21 and 30 metric tons, placing the animal alongside modern humpback whales in overall scale. Unlike many earlier ichthyosaurs armed with formidable teeth for grasping large prey, Shonosaurus possessed comparatively slender jaws and reduced dentition, suggesting a diet centered upon softer marine animals, particularly squid and similar cephalopods that flourished throughout Triassic oceans. Another species carried this expansion even farther. Shonosaurus sicaniensis, discovered in what is now British Columbia, Canada, stretched to nearly 21 meters, which is about 69 feet. At that length, it rivaled the largest living sperm whales. Such dimensions appeared astonishingly early in marine reptile history, demonstrating that enormous size evolved repeatedly within the ichthyosaur lineage instead of representing a rare evolutionary accident. Even these giants may not have marked the upper boundary. During 2016, fossil enthusiast Paul de la Salle noticed several unusual fragments scattered across a beach near Lilstock in Somerset, England. At first glance, the pieces resembled weathered rocks. Closer examination revealed they belonged to an immense lower jaw, unlike anything previously recognized. The fossil was described during 2018, and in 2024, the animal received the name Ichthyotitan severnensis, meaning the giant fish lizard of the Severn region. Current estimates suggest this reptile measured around 25 meters, which is about 82 feet. That places it alongside the modern blue whale, the largest confirmed animal alive today. Remarkably, analysis indicates the known specimen had not yet reached full maturity. Growth was still continuing when the animal died, leaving open the possibility that fully grown individuals exceeded the estimated length preserved by the fossil. Several additional fragmentary discoveries hint at even greater dimensions. Some researchers cautiously propose lengths between 30 and 35 meters, which is about 98 to 115 feet. Those estimates remain provisional because the available material is incomplete, although they invite the possibility that the greatest ichthyosaurs surpassed even the largest blue whales. Future discoveries will determine whether those extraordinary figures withstand closer examination. Whatever the final limits prove to be, the pattern remains unmistakable. Within only a few tens of millions of years after reptiles first entered the sea, ichthyosaurs had already produced animals approaching the maximum size that life appears capable of sustaining in the ocean. Their history demonstrates how rapidly evolution can approach nature's greatest scales when abundant food, open ecological opportunity, and efficient body design come together. Scientific names often remain unchanged long after new discoveries reshape their meaning. Ichthyosaurs have long been placed among the reptiles, a classification based upon ancestry and skeletal anatomy. As researchers began examining their chemistry, growth patterns, and preserved soft tissues, another picture gradually emerged. The animals carried a reptilian heritage, yet many aspects of their biology resembled creatures that would not appear until much later in Earth's history. Most living reptiles rely upon external warmth to regulate body temperature. Their metabolism rises beneath the sun and slows as surrounding conditions become cooler. Such animals are described as ectothermic, meaning their internal temperature closely follows the environment around them. This strategy conserves energy, although it also limits prolonged activity in cold water or at great depth, where temperatures remain low throughout the year. Ichthyosaurs appear to have followed a different path. One important line of evidence comes from oxygen isotope analysis preserved within fossilized bones and teeth. The distribution of these naturally occurring isotopes allows scientists to estimate body temperatures during life. In ichthyosaurs, the outer parts of the skeleton do not show the cooling expected if body temperature closely matched surrounding seawater. Instead, the differences remain surprisingly small, indicating that internal warmth was being maintained throughout much of the body instead of dissipating into the ocean. Their skeletons provide another clue. Thin slices of fossil bone reveal dense networks of blood vessels, together with rapid growth patterns unlike those found in most living reptiles. Such highly vascularized bone forms when tissues receive abundant nutrients and oxygen, supporting accelerated development and elevated metabolism. Similar growth signatures appear in birds and mammals, both groups capable of producing substantial internal heat through their own biological processes. Chemical evidence strengthened this interpretation even further. During 2018, researchers studying a remarkably preserved specimen of Stenopterygius from the Holzmaden shale in Germany identified molecular traces of a fatty layer preserved beneath the skin. Detailed analysis showed strong similarities to blubber, the specialized insulating tissue carried by whales, dolphins, and several other warm-blooded marine mammals. This represented the first direct chemical evidence that an ichthyosaur possessed a substantial insulating layer while alive. Blubber serves a purpose extending far beyond insulation alone. It functions effectively only when an animal continuously generates internal heat. Without elevated metabolism, such tissue would provide little advantage because there would be insufficient warmth to retain. Its presence, therefore, supports the growing conclusion that ichthyosaurs maintained body temperatures through active physiological regulation instead of relying upon surrounding seawater. Earlier research published during 2010 reached a similar conclusion using independent methods. Estimated body temperatures approached approximately 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit, remarkably close to the internal temperatures maintained by modern dolphins and whales. That consistency across separate studies has strengthened confidence that ichthyosaurs possessed an unexpectedly advanced metabolism. Such physiology transformed the way these reptiles interacted with the ocean. Warm muscles continued functioning efficiently during extended dives into cold water, allowing sustained swimming, rapid pursuit of prey, and repeated descents far below the sunlit surface. A cold blooded hunter entering those depths would gradually lose strength as body temperature declined, while an internally heated predator could remain active despite the surrounding chill. The growing collection of evidence has not removed ichthyosaurs from the reptile family tree. Their ancestry remains unchanged. What has changed is the understanding of how flexible that heritage could become, revealing a lineage that expanded far beyond the biological limits once thought to define reptiles in the sea. Light changes character as it descends through the sea. The familiar blue of the surface fades into muted shades, then into darkness where color loses meaning altogether. In that immense vertical world, survival depends upon gathering every possible trace of illumination. Long before modern whales explored those depths, ichthyosaurs had already solved the problem with organs unlike anything the vertebrate world has produced before or since. Among the most extraordinary belong to Temnodontosaurus, an early Jurassic hunter whose fossilized eyes measured approximately 26.4 centimeters across, which is about 10.4 inches. No known vertebrate, living or extinct, possessed larger eyes. Even the enormous blue whale, despite its immense body, carries comparatively modest eyes because its feeding strategy does not depend upon detecting distant movement in dim water. Temnodontosaurus followed a different path, investing an astonishing amount of its skull in the machinery of vision. Another remarkable example appeared in Ophthalmosaurus, whose name translates as eye lizard. Although much smaller than Temnodontosaurus, reaching approximately 6 meters in length, which is about 20 feet, its skull devoted an extraordinary amount of space to its eyes. Each eye measured roughly 10 centimeters across, which is about 4 inches, leaving only enough room for the jaws, brain, and surrounding muscles. The proportions seem unusual at first glance, yet they reveal exactly where natural selection directed its resources. In an environment where light became scarce, vision offered a decisive advantage. Gigantic eyes alone could not survive the crushing pressure of deep water. Every descent increased the force pressing against the eyeball, threatening to deform delicate tissues responsible for focusing light. Ichthyosaurs carried an elegant solution inherited from many reptiles and birds, then refined for an entirely different purpose. Surrounding each eye was a circular framework known as the sclerotic ring, built from tightly fitted bony plates. This rigid support helped preserve the eye's shape even during dives far below the reach of ordinary sunlight, allowing clear vision where an unsupported eye would struggle. Those depths formed a world unlike the waters above. Sunlight gradually disappeared until only brief flashes interrupted the darkness. Small fishes, squid, and drifting invertebrates generated their own illumination through bioluminescence, producing brief pulses that revealed movement more often than form. Every flicker represented either opportunity or danger. Detecting those fleeting signals depended upon gathering as many incoming photons as possible before they vanished into the surrounding water. Eye size plays a central role in that challenge. A larger pupil captures substantially more light than a smaller one, increasing visual sensitivity when illumination becomes extremely limited. At great depth, survival may depend upon distinguishing a faint shimmer from complete darkness. The difference is measured less by sharpness than by the total amount of light entering the eye, making diameter one of the most important adaptations available to a deep diving hunter. Living animals provide an illuminating comparison. Sperm whales and giant squid both possess unusually large eyes relative to their environment, allowing them to function in dim waters where encounters occur beyond the reach of sunlight. Although separated from ichthyosaurs by millions of years and belonging to entirely different branches of life, they arrived at remarkably similar solutions because the physics of underwater vision imposes the same demands upon every large predator. The immense eyes of ichthyosaurs therefore reveal far more than an impressive anatomical record. They point toward a hunting ground hidden far below the waves, where darkness became another habitat to master, and where these remarkable reptiles expanded the boundaries of vertebrate life into regions scarcely touched before their arrival. There came a moment in ichthyosaur history when the shoreline ceased to matter. It was not marked by a dramatic change in skeleton or by the appearance of larger teeth or faster swimming. The transformation unfolded within reproduction itself. Once that step had been taken, every generation that followed belonged entirely to the sea. With no practical route back to the beaches their distant ancestors had once depended upon. Nearly every living reptile still carries the imprint of its terrestrial ancestry. Turtles drag themselves ashore to bury eggs in sand. Crocodiles build nests along riverbanks. Lizards and snakes seek protected places where developing embryos can remain until hatching. Eggs require stable conditions that water cannot easily provide, and laying them usually demands at least a brief return to land. Those repeated journeys create moments of vulnerability, exposing adults and their offspring alike to predators and changing environmental conditions. Ichthyosaurs abandoned that pattern altogether through the evolution of viviparity, giving birth to fully developed young while remaining in open water. Fossil evidence leaves little room for uncertainty. Multiple skeletons have been discovered with embryos preserved inside the body cavity of the mother, capturing different stages of pregnancy across several species. Among the most remarkable discoveries is a specimen preserved during birth itself, offering an extraordinary glimpse into a moment that unfolded almost 200 million years ago. The newborn emerges tail first. Modern dolphins and whales follow the same pattern because it reduces the risk of drowning during delivery. If the head appeared first, the young animal might begin breathing before the body had completely left the birth canal, creating danger while still submerged. A tail-first delivery delays the first breath until the final moment, allowing the newborn to reach the surface with far greater safety. Two entirely separate evolutionary lineages arrived at this identical solution because the physical demands of underwater birth leave very little room for alternative designs. Fossils also reveal that newborn ichthyosaurs entered life remarkably prepared. Their paddle limbs were already fully formed, their tails possessed the structures needed for efficient swimming, and their bodies carried the proportions required for movement through open water. There was no prolonged period of helplessness beside a nest or sheltered shoreline. From the beginning, they accompanied their mothers through the same marine world that sustained every stage of adult life. This innovation removed constraints that had shaped reptilian reproduction for hundreds of millions of years. There were no nesting beaches to defend against rivals. Seasonal migrations to suitable breeding grounds disappeared. Eggs no longer remained exposed to storms, drought, scavengers, or changing shorelines. Reproduction became independent of land, allowing populations to spread across immense ocean basins without maintaining any physical connection to continental coasts. Freedom, however, carried its own consequence. As body shape became increasingly specialized for swimming, hauling onto land became progressively less practical. Broad paddle limbs generated thrust in water but offered almost no support on solid ground. Flexible spines, adapted for aquatic movement, lacked the structural arrangement needed to bear body weight outside the sea. Live birth completed that transformation. Once offspring developed entirely inside the mother and entered the world already swimming, returning to shore offered no evolutionary advantage. The commitment was complete. Every essential chapter of life unfolded within saltwater, from the first heartbeat before birth to the final breath. Feeding, migration, courtship, reproduction, and growth all remained beneath the changing surface. Ichthyosaurs became the earliest known vertebrates to sever every biological dependence upon land, turning the ocean from a destination into the only world they would ever know. Some discoveries do not begin in the field. They begin in a museum drawer, where an object rests for decades, while new questions wait for the right generation to ask them. In 2018, scientists returned to an ichthyosaur fossil that had been preserved in Germany for well over a century. The specimen had already revealed its skeleton many times before. This time, it revealed traces of the animal itself, preserved with a level of detail few believed could survive across 180 million years. The fossil belonged to Stenopterygius and came from the Holzmaden Posidonia shale of Baden-Württemberg, Germany. That remarkable rock formation is celebrated for preserving delicate tissues that usually disappear soon after death. Layers of fine sediment settled over the seafloor with exceptional care, sealing organisms away from scavengers and limiting decay. Within those rocks, the outline of an ichthyosaur remained almost intact, preserving information far beyond bones and teeth. Researchers identified remnants of original skin that still retained flexibility despite their immense age. Separate layers corresponding to the epidermis and dermis could be distinguished, preserving the architecture of the skin itself rather than a flattened stain alone. Even more surprising, chemical investigation identified a broad fatty layer beneath those tissues. Its composition matched what would be expected from blubber-like tissue, supporting earlier evidence that ichthyosaurs maintained elevated body temperatures through internal heat production rather than relying solely upon surrounding water. The skin carried another surprise. Unlike the textured covering of crocodiles or most living lizards, it lacked scales. Its outer surface appears to have been smooth, presenting fewer irregularities to flowing water. Modern leatherback sea turtles display a similarly streamlined covering that reduces resistance while swimming through the open ocean. For an active predator traveling long distances, every reduction in drag conserved energy and improved efficiency. The surface of the body became another component in a finely tuned system shaped by countless generations of selection. Even color survived in microscopic form. Specialized pigment cells called melanophores remained preserved in 3 dimensions, allowing researchers to examine their arrangement with advanced spectroscopy and detailed examination using penetrating beams of high-energy radiation. Those techniques reconstructed the original distribution of pigment across the body with remarkable confidence. After 180 million years, the fossils still carried enough biological information to reveal how the animal appeared while alive. The reconstructed pattern showed a familiar design. The upper surface was dark, while the underside remained much lighter. This arrangement, known as countershading, appears repeatedly among swift marine animals because it offers effective camouflage from multiple directions. Viewed from above, the darker back blends with the dim water below. Viewed from beneath, the pale belly merges with the brighter surface illuminated by sunlight. Predators searching upward and prey searching downward both encounter an outline that is far more difficult to distinguish against its background. Living dolphins display this same pattern today because the physical conditions of the open sea remain unchanged. The resemblance extends beyond color alone. Smooth skin, insulating fatty tissue, streamlined proportions, and efficient camouflage all emerged independently in lineages separated by enormous stretches of evolutionary history. Water repeatedly favors the same practical solutions whenever large air-breathing hunters become permanent residents of the open ocean. Together, these preserved tissues create the most complete biological portrait ever assembled for an ichthyosaur. Skeleton, skin, pigment, and body covering combine into a single picture, revealing an animal whose appearance, texture, and physiology converged so closely upon modern marine mammals that the distance between reptile and whale seems to narrow into little more than the shape demanded by the sea itself. Across the history of life, there are moments when two stories begin on distant pages yet arrive at nearly the same ending. They share no recent ancestors, inherit no common blueprint, and travel through separate ages divided by more than 160 million years. Even so, their final forms become so alike that they appear almost interchangeable. The meeting point between ichthyosaurs and dolphins belongs to that rare category, where resemblance reaches far beyond appearance and enters the realm of physical necessity. Evolutionary biologists describe this pattern as convergent evolution. The term refers to unrelated organisms independently acquiring similar features while adapting to comparable environments. Shared ancestry is not responsible for the resemblance. Similar physical demands shape different lineages toward comparable solutions. The open ocean presents those demands with unusual consistency. Water resists movement, rewards efficient propulsion, and punishes unnecessary drag. Every large hunter that depends upon speed must negotiate those same unchanging conditions. Among all known vertebrates, the relationship between ichthyosaurs and dolphins stands as perhaps the clearest and most thoroughly documented example of this process. One lineage descended from terrestrial reptiles that entered the sea during the Triassic period. The other emerged much later from hoofed mammals returning to marine life after flourishing on land. Their evolutionary journeys remained entirely separate, yet each gradually acquired an astonishing collection of matching adaptations. The similarities extend through nearly every major aspect of body design. Both evolved streamlined bodies shaped like elongated torpedoes that divide water with minimal resistance. Both developed crescent-shaped tail fins, providing powerful thrust from the rear, while the front limbs transformed into broad steering paddles. Each acquired a dorsal stabilizing fin that improved balance during swift movement. Evidence indicates that both groups gave birth to living young in open water, maintained elevated internal body temperatures, carried insulating layers of blubber, displayed dark backs with pale undersides for countershading, and possessed exceptionally large eyes suited for hunting where light becomes scarce. Echolocation has also been proposed for ichthyosaurs, although present evidence remains insufficient to confirm that remarkable possibility. These repeated solutions fascinated the evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould more than any other example of convergence. He described ichthyosaurs as his favorite illustration of the process because they approach the form of modern marine mammals with extraordinary precision. He observed that this reptilian lineage evolved a dorsal fin and a powerful tail in exactly the locations demanded by efficient movement through water, producing what he called the proper hydrological design for an active ocean predator. Gould drew a broader lesson from that observation. Evolution certainly depends upon chance, mutation, and changing environments, yet physical laws establish boundaries within which those changes unfold. Bodies may vary endlessly, but flowing water imposes consistent requirements. Whenever a large, warm blooded, air breathing hunter occupies the open sea, certain arrangements repeatedly outperform others. Those successful forms become more common generation after generation because they function exceptionally well within that environment. The ichthyosaur, therefore, represents far more than an extinct reptile with an unusual appearance. Its body demonstrates that natural selection often follows pathways constrained by mathematics, fluid dynamics, and energy conservation. Under similar circumstances, distant branches of life's family tree can discover remarkably similar destinations. Across immense spans of time, the ocean has remained the same patient sculptor, shaping unrelated creatures into forms that reveal an enduring conversation between biology and the physical world. There came an age when the seas of Earth shared a familiar presence across almost every horizon. Whether drifting through tropical shallows or crossing colder waters near the edges of distant continents, an ichthyosaur was never far from the rhythm of marine life. For millions upon millions of years, these reptiles occupied an extraordinary position, spreading across the globe with a success unmatched by any other vertebrate lineage before or since. The Jurassic period, stretching from approximately 200 million to 145 million years ago, marked the height of that expansion. Fossils from this interval have been uncovered across Europe, North America, South America, Asia, Australia, and Antarctica. Every major ocean basin preserves traces of their existence. Continents occupied different positions than they do today, connected by broad seaways that allowed marine animals to travel immense distances. Ichthyosaurs flourished throughout this interconnected world, adapting to regional conditions while remaining unmistakably part of the same remarkable family. Much of what is now Europe rested beneath warm epicontinental seas rich with life. These shallow waters received nutrients from surrounding coastlines while remaining linked to deeper marine environments farther offshore. Fish gathered in tremendous numbers, cephalopods drifted through the water column, and countless smaller organisms supported an intricate web of predators and prey. Sediments accumulating on those ancient seafloors preserved skeletons with unusual fidelity, leaving behind one of the richest records of Jurassic marine ecosystems ever discovered. In these deposits, ichthyosaurs appear with striking abundance, revealing how thoroughly they occupied these productive habitats. Their diversity reached an equally impressive summit. Early Jurassic giants, such as Temnodontosaurus, ruled as formidable hunters, carrying immense jaws and enormous eyes suited for pursuing prey through dim waters. During the Middle and Late Jurassic, forms such as Ophthalmosaurus refined a different strategy, combining exceptional vision with agile swimming and repeated descents into deeper parts of the sea. Across the same span of time, Other species occupied additional ecological roles, ensuring that nearly every level of the marine environment contained an ichthyosaur adapted for life there. This broad distribution carried consequences extending far beyond the animals themselves. Large predatory reptiles influenced the abundance and behavior of fish, cephalopods, and smaller marine reptiles. Their presence affected where prey gathered, how populations expanded, and which species prospered across successive generations. Ecologists describe such organisms as keystone species because their influence extends throughout an ecosystem, shaping relationships among countless other forms of life. Jurassic ichthyosaurs fulfilled that role across oceans spanning the planet. Marine environments also reached unprecedented complexity during this period. Coral communities expanded across warm seas. Plankton supported increasingly productive food chains, and predatory interactions unfolded through every layer of the water column. From sunlit surface waters to deeper hunting grounds, ecological networks became richer than those known from earlier chapters of Earth's history. Ichthyosaurs occupied the center of that flourishing system, participating in nearly every major exchange of energy within the marine world. Many creatures have achieved regional dominance across geological time. Sharks have persisted through extraordinary spans of history, and whales eventually came to command modern oceans. Even so, no other single vertebrate lineage is known to have maintained ecological supremacy across every major ocean basin for such an extended interval. Their reign endured through changing coastlines, shifting climates, and evolving communities, leaving an enduring signature written into rocks scattered across nearly every continent, where their bones still trace the outline of a world once ruled by masters of the sea. Even at the height of their success, the oceans belonged to more than one dynasty. Across the same waters where ichthyosaurs pursued fish through open seas, another lineage was following its own evolutionary path. Their ancestry differed, their bodies took another form, and their methods of hunting revealed a separate solution to life beneath the waves. The Jurassic Oceans became a place where distinct designs could thrive together, each answering the same challenges in remarkably different ways. Plesiosaurs and pliosaurs traced their origins to reptiles that also entered marine environments after the upheavals of the Triassic world. They never acquired the streamlined outline of ichthyosaurs. Instead, they relied on four powerful flippers that moved with a flying motion through water. Many plesiosaurs carried graceful necks, supporting relatively small heads, allowing careful strikes at agile prey. Pliosaurs followed another direction entirely, developing short necks, immense skulls, and jaws equipped to overpower large animals with crushing force. Their appearance reflected strength more than speed, yet they proved every bit as capable of ruling the sea. For tens of millions of years, these groups occupied neighboring worlds without driving one another into extinction. Their ecological roles overlapped, although they were rarely identical. Ichthyosaurs excelled as swift pursuit hunters, covering broad stretches of open water with remarkable efficiency. Long-necked plesiosaurs often searched among reefs or schools of fish where flexibility offered an advantage. Giant pliosaurs entered the picture as formidable predators capable of targeting prey large enough to challenge the greatest ichthyosaurs. The ocean contained room for several masters because each exploited different opportunities within the same immense environment. Among the most imposing of these competitors were Liopleurodon and Kronosaurus. Massive skulls dominated their bodies, armed with powerful jaws lined by robust teeth. They accelerated through the water with surprising speed despite their tremendous size. relying on explosive bursts to seize prey before escape became possible. Encounters between large pliosaurs and giant ichthyosaurs likely represented one of the greatest contests among marine predators during the Mesozoic era, with both lineages refining their abilities across countless generations. Pressure from such rivals influenced the continuing evolution of ichthyosaurs. Their dark upper surface blended with deeper water when viewed from above, while the pale underside merged with brighter surface light when observed from below. This counter-shaded pattern reduced visibility from several directions, helping conceal them from prey as well as from large predators rising through darker depths. The effectiveness of this camouflage depended upon the geometry of light within the sea, turning the entire water column into part of their defense. As the late Jurassic progressed, subtle changes emerged across many marine ecosystems. Ichthyosaurs remained widespread, yet their diversity began to contract in certain regions, while plesiosaurs expanded into ecological roles that had once belonged largely to their streamlined counterparts. This shift unfolded through gradual replacement instead of dramatic conflict. Different feeding strategies, changing prey communities, and environmental pressures slowly altered the balance among marine reptiles without producing a single decisive victor. For more than 100 million years, these rival lineages shared the oceans, each rising, adapting, and enduring beside the other. Their relationship resembled neighboring empires whose borders shifted with changing conditions, while neither completely erased the other from history. The marine world remained broad enough to sustain both, although the balance never remained perfectly fixed, and the changing distribution of life across the sea became another expression of evolution's patient, persistent rhythm. Evolution rarely stops refining a successful design. Across millions of years, each generation carries small adjustments, each one measured against survival. By the Middle Jurassic, that long process had shaped one ichthyosaur into a creature whose entire body seemed devoted to a single realm. It was called Ophthalmosaurus, a name meaning eye lizard, and nearly every feature it possessed pointed toward a life spent far below the bright waters of the surface. Although it reached only about 6 meters in length, which is about 19.7 feet, Ophthalmosaurus was modest beside the greatest giants of its family. Size no longer defined success, precision did. The skull appeared almost sculpted around its enormous eye sockets, leaving comparatively little room for anything else. Each eye measured roughly 10 centimeters across, which is about 3.9 inches. Relative to body size, these were the largest eyes known among all vertebrates, an extraordinary investment of anatomy that reflected the demands of a world where light was exceedingly scarce. Those remarkable eyes relied upon more than diameter alone. Surrounding each eyeball lay a sclerotic ring, a circle of tightly fitted bones that reinforced the globe against tremendous water pressure. Without such support, deep dives could deform delicate tissues and impair vision. The enlarged ring acted as an internal framework, allowing the eye to maintain its shape while descending into regions where the surrounding ocean pressed with immense force. Vision remained dependable, even as conditions changed far beyond anything experienced near the surface. Its feeding apparatus revealed another layer of specialization. The jaws carried very few teeth, and those that remained were small and poorly suited for crushing heavy shells or gripping struggling prey. Instead, the mouth appears to have been adapted for capturing soft-bodied animals, especially squid drifting through deeper waters. Flexible prey required speed and accurate timing instead of overwhelming bite force. Every pursuit depended upon detecting movement where illumination had nearly disappeared. Studies combining eye proportions, skeletal structure, and comparisons with living marine divers suggest that Ophthalmosaurus may have reached depths approaching 600 meters, which is about 1,969 feet. At that depth, sunlight no longer provides meaningful illumination. The surrounding water belongs to the mesopelagic zone, where darkness dominates and living organisms generate many of the brightest points of light through their own chemistry. Tiny flashes from drifting animals, brief pulses from escaping prey, and scattered glimmers from distant creatures became the visual landscape through which this hunter navigated. Eyes of such exceptional size could gather the smallest traces of available light. Even slight improvements in light collection become significant, where illumination falls close to nothing. A faint glow, invisible to another predator, might reveal the outline of a squid or the movement of a small school of fish. Success depended upon detecting those subtle signals before they vanished into surrounding darkness. The enlarged visual system transformed tiny differences in brightness into opportunities for survival. Seen together, these features describe more than another marine reptile. They reveal an animal whose body had become almost entirely devoted to one ecological role: giant eyes, reinforced vision, streamlined swimming, and specialized feeding all converged upon the same destination. Ophthalmosaurus no longer relied upon the familiar rhythms of the sunlit sea. Its true domain existed where daylight faded away, and where the living sparks of distant creatures became the only guide through the water. The shape of an empire can change long before its borders disappear. Across the opening chapters of the Cretaceous, the oceans still carried swift ichthyosaurs through familiar hunting grounds, yet the deeper current of evolution had begun to lose momentum. Nothing dramatic announced the transition. The lineage continued to survive, predators still pursued prey, and young still entered the sea, already prepared for life within it. Beneath that appearance of continuity, however, the pace of change itself had begun to ease. The explosive creativity that marked the Triassic belonged to an earlier age. During those first tens of millions of years, ichthyosaurs repeatedly explored new forms, feeding strategies, and ecological roles. The Jurassic preserved much of that success, but by the early Cretaceous, the rhythm had shifted. A comprehensive study published during the 21st century by Dr. Valentine Fischer and colleagues examined this transformation in detail. Their work showed that ichthyosaurs retained considerable diversity. Although the production of fundamentally new forms had slowed substantially compared with their remarkable beginnings. Evolutionary biologists describe this process through the concept of the phenotypic evolution rate. The phrase refers to the speed at which a lineage develops new body structures and functional innovations across successive generations. Early ichthyosaurs displayed a rapid pace, producing a remarkable range of designs within a comparatively brief span of geological time. During the Cretaceous, that rate became only a fraction of its former level. The lineage remained successful, although it generated far fewer fresh solutions to changing conditions. The difference appears clearly in the fossil record. Earlier chapters revealed streamlined pursuit hunters, shell crushers, suction feeders, colossal giants, deep diving specialists, and numerous intermediate forms occupying different ecological roles. As millions of years passed, those striking contrasts gradually narrowed. Ichthyosaurs increasingly resembled variations upon a familiar design instead of experiments reaching toward unexplored possibilities. They had largely ceased expanding into new ecological opportunities. Their effort became one of maintaining territories they had already mastered. Many later species are now grouped within a single widespread genus called Platypterygis. These animals remained capable marine predators, although their anatomy reflected broader, less specialized adaptations than several celebrated Jurassic relatives. Their bodies stretched into longer proportions. The eyes became relatively smaller, and the teeth grew larger and more robust. Such features suggest hunters prepared to capture a wider variety of prey instead of excelling within narrowly defined ecological roles. Versatility had replaced increasing specialization. Paleontologists sometimes describe this condition as evolutionary stagnation. The phrase does not imply weakness, nor does it suggest that the animals suddenly became poorly adapted. It refers instead to a lineage whose response to environmental change becomes increasingly conservative. Natural selection continues operating, populations continue reproducing, and survival remains possible, yet genuinely novel body plans emerge with diminishing frequency. The machinery of evolution still functions, although its creative output grows progressively restrained. Viewed across millions of years, the pattern forms a narrowing arc. The Triassic displays abundant experimentation, the Jurassic preserves extraordinary refinement, and the Cretaceous records a gradual reduction in innovation. Ichthyosaurs still crossed the seas with impressive efficiency, carrying the legacy of countless earlier adaptations within every movement. Their history had entered a different phase, one defined less by invention than by endurance, as if a lineage that had once answered every challenge with another transformation had begun, almost imperceptibly, to repeat the same enduring reply. A shoreline reveals the retreat of the sea one small wave at a time. The water draws back so gradually that its departure is easy to overlook until the rocks stand uncovered and the tide has already gone. The history of the ichthyosaurs followed a similar pattern. Their disappearance was not marked by one overwhelming catastrophe. It unfolded through successive changes that accumulated across millions of years, steadily reducing a lineage that had once flourished in nearly every ocean on Earth. The first stage began during the early Cenomanian, around 100 million years ago. Fossils from this interval show that many familiar branches of the ichthyosaur family tree were already disappearing. Species survived, yet the remarkable variety that had characterized earlier ages diminished noticeably. Distinct body plans became fewer, specialized feeding strategies declined, and ecological diversity narrowed. The lineage still endured, although its capacity to occupy many different ways of life had faded into a much smaller collection of broadly similar animals. This contraction coincided with an interval of profound environmental instability. The Cretaceous world remained exceptionally warm, with polar regions free of permanent ice and global sea levels standing far above those of the modern world. Ocean temperatures shifted across large regions, and marine circulation patterns adjusted as continents continued their gradual movement. None of these changes alone guaranteed extinction, yet together they transformed the conditions upon which countless marine organisms depended. Stable ecosystems became increasingly difficult to maintain as familiar environments drifted into new forms. Food webs reflected those transformations. Belemnites and several other cephalopods formed an important part of the ichthyosaur diet for millions of years. Evidence from marine fossils indicates that many of these prey populations were themselves declining or changing distribution during the early Cretaceous. Predators, capable of remarkable speed and endurance, still required dependable food sources. As those resources became less predictable across broad stretches of ocean, successful hunting demanded adjustments that increasingly specialized ichthyosaurs struggled to achieve. Movement through the sea also depended upon routes established across generations. Seasonal journeys likely connected feeding grounds with places favorable for reproduction, following water temperatures and productive marine habitats. As ocean currents shifted and thermal boundaries changed position, those migratory pathways may have become less reliable. Coastal environments suitable for giving birth could likewise have been altered by exceptionally high sea levels, reshaped shorelines, and changing patterns of shallow marine habitat. Each alteration added another challenge to a lineage already losing its former evolutionary flexibility. The second stage arrived near the boundary between the Cenomanian and Turonian ages, approximately 95 million years ago. By then, the widespread genus Platypterygius represented the remaining chapter of ichthyosaur history. During this interval, marine ecosystems experienced another broad wave of biological loss. Certain microplankton groups declined, numerous ammonites disappeared, and important reef-building bivalves also suffered major reductions. The disappearance of Platypterygius formed part of this wider restructuring rather than an isolated event affecting only one lineage. Across roughly 5 million years, an empire that had endured for about 157 million years dissolved into the fossil record. No single day marked its conclusion. The process unfolded through diminishing diversity, shifting oceans, changing food webs, and ecological pressures that accumulated beyond the ability of even these extraordinary swimmers to overcome. When the final ichthyosaurs vanished, the sea continued its endless motion, carrying forward other lineages while closing one of the longest and most remarkable chapters in the history of vertebrate life. Stories about extinction often settle into memory long before the evidence does. Once an explanation becomes familiar, it can persist for generations, repeated until it feels inseparable from the truth. The history of the ichthyosaurs followed that path. For much of the 20th century, their disappearance was explained through a tale of defeat, one powerful marine reptile replacing another in a straightforward struggle for survival. Fossils collected over later decades gradually revealed a different ending, one shaped less by conquest than by timing and environmental change. The best-known version claimed that mosasaurs drove ichthyosaurs into extinction. At first glance, the idea appeared convincing. Mosasaurs became enormous marine predators during the late Cretaceous and eventually ruled the oceans with impressive success. Since both groups occupied the role of large carnivores, it seemed natural to imagine one replacing the other through direct competition. This explanation appeared in books, museum displays, and popular documentaries, becoming one of the most widely repeated stories in prehistoric science. The fossil record, however, tells a different sequence. Large-bodied mosasaurs did not emerge until roughly 3 million years after the last known ichthyosaurs had already disappeared. Their rise occurred after the ecological space had already been left vacant. They inherited an ocean transformed by earlier extinctions instead of forcing those extinctions themselves. The overlap required for prolonged competition between flourishing ichthyosaurs and giant mosasaurs never truly existed. Time, preserved layer by layer in ancient rock, separated these empires more clearly than earlier researchers realized. Another proposal placed responsibility upon plesiosaurs, particularly the later short-necked forms that shared many hunting grounds with ichthyosaurs. Yet this interpretation also weakened as additional discoveries accumulated. Polycotylid plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs occupied the same ocean basins for approximately 19 million years, without one eliminating the other. Their coexistence demonstrates that similar predators could persist together while exploiting different combinations of prey, swimming depth, and feeding strategy. Competition certainly existed, although the evidence does not support a simple narrative in which one lineage overwhelmed the other. A broader explanation emerged through detailed studies of evolutionary history. Research published during 2016 by Dr. Valentin Fischer and colleagues concluded that ichthyosaurs had entered a prolonged period of declining evolutionary responsiveness, while environmental instability intensified around them. Their capacity to generate new body forms and functional innovations had slowed dramatically compared with the remarkable pace that characterized their earlier history. Climatic fluctuations, shifting marine ecosystems, and changing food webs placed increasing pressure upon animals whose greatest strengths had become closely tied to conditions that no longer remained stable. This combination proved more significant than any single rival. A lineage capable of evolving from modest beginnings into giants within roughly 3 million years had gradually lost the flexibility that once defined it. Adaptations perfected through millions of successful generations became increasingly difficult to reshape as familiar ecological networks unraveled. Evolution continued, though at a pace that no longer matched the speed of environmental transformation. The ichthyosaur story leaves behind a lesson written across deep time. Extraordinary specialization can unlock remarkable possibilities, allowing life to master places that once seemed unreachable. The same specialization may also narrow the range of future choices when the world itself begins to change. Success and vulnerability can grow from the very same adaptations, and the boundary between endurance and disappearance may emerge only after countless generations have already crossed it. Absence leaves no fossil of its own. It announces itself through the creatures that no longer appear, through familiar forms that vanish from one layer of stone to the next. Around 95 million years ago, the final traces of Platypterygus came to an end. A lineage that had crossed changing seas for roughly 157 million years ceased to exist. Across the oceans, an enduring presence faded from Earth's living tapestry with surprising abruptness. Platypterygius had become the last representative of the ichthyosaurs, carrying an inheritance that stretched back to the aftermath of the greatest extinction in planetary history. Fossils of this final genus have been recovered from regions that are now Australia, Europe, and North America, showing that its range still extended across multiple ocean basins during the early Cretaceous. Even after earlier branches had disappeared, this survivor remained widespread, continuing an almost unimaginable legacy of marine life that had endured through shifting continents, changing climates, and evolving ecosystems. Then the record changes. Sedimentary layers preserve Platypterygius, and younger layers do not. Although extinction unfolded across geological time, the final disappearance appears comparatively abrupt in the fossil record. The pattern resembles the closing of a long chapter, whose final page arrives more quickly than expected. One interval contains evidence of an experienced ocean hunter. The next reveals only its absence. Earth itself looked strikingly different during this period. The Atlantic Ocean was still young and much narrower than today. A broad inland sea divided North America, creating the Western Interior Seaway, while global sea levels ranked among the highest known in the planet's history. Shorelines stretched across landscapes that are now dry continents, and warm marine waters connected habitats over immense distances. These conditions formed a setting unlike the modern world, yet one in which the disappearance of a dominant predator reshaped ecological relationships across enormous regions. The vacancy did not receive an immediate replacement. Roughly 3 million years passed before mosasaurs evolved into giants capable of occupying a similar position near the top of marine food webs. That interval represents more than an interesting numerical gap. It reflects an ocean adjusting to the loss of a lineage whose ecological role had become deeply woven into countless interactions between predators and prey. Energy continued to move through the seas, yet the architecture of those food webs had changed. Other animals gradually expanded into the available opportunities. Mosasaurs eventually flourished. Certain plesiosaurs continued to diversify. Sharks increased their influence, and many groups of bony fish evolved into new forms. Each lineage contributed something distinctive, although none recreated the precise biology of the ichthyosaurs. Their body design, reproductive strategy, deep diving adaptations, and evolutionary history belonged to a branch that had ended forever. The disappearance of the ichthyosaurs also reminds us that the Cretaceous experienced more than one ending. Their extinction occurred roughly 28 million years before the asteroid impact that later marked the close of the age of non-avian dinosaurs. Earth was already changing in profound ways long before that celebrated catastrophe. The oceans carried memories of an earlier conclusion, one measured not by a single dramatic moment, but by the lasting emptiness left when an entire dynasty slipped beyond the horizon of life. Long before paleontology became a science, the cliffs were already telling their story. Storms loosened stones from coastal slopes, waves carried fragments onto narrow beaches, and people gathered unusual rocks without knowing they were touching the remains of creatures from a vanished world. Among the most common of these discoveries were the disc-shaped vertebrae of ichthyosaurs. They appeared often along parts of the English coastline, familiar enough to collect, yet impossible to explain within the knowledge of the time. Without a framework for extinction or deep geological history, these fossils invited imaginative interpretations. Some were regarded as curiosities shaped by nature itself. Others were assigned to familiar animals whose forms seemed close enough to fit the evidence. In 1766, a specimen measuring about 12 meters, which is about 39 feet, uncovered near Weston, close to Bath, was described as the remains of a young whale. The fossil clearly belonged to something large, although no living creature matched it completely. Only a few decades later, another remarkable skeleton emerged. During 1804, a specimen measuring roughly 4 meters, which is about 13 feet, discovered in Wales, received a different identity. This time, it was classified as a giant lizard. Such conclusions reflected careful observation limited by the scientific ideas available at the time. Naturalists compared unfamiliar bones with animals they already understood, assembling explanations that seemed reasonable before Earth's deeper history became visible through accumulating evidence. Everything began to change during 1811 and 1812 on the rugged cliffs of Lyme Regis along England's Jurassic coast. Joseph Anning noticed an extraordinary skull projecting from the rock. His younger sister, Mary Anning, only 12 years old, continued the excavation with remarkable determination. Piece by piece, she uncovered the rest of the skeleton, extending for more than 5 yards. The fossil became the first nearly complete ichthyosaur specimen to receive detailed scientific study, offering researchers an animal far more complete than scattered bones could ever reveal. Even with such an exceptional discovery before them, the scientific community struggled to decide what they were examining. Scholars in London compared the skeleton with crocodiles, fishes, and later with marine reptiles that would eventually become known from other discoveries. Each comparison explained certain features while leaving others unresolved. The animal possessed characteristics that crossed familiar boundaries, resisting every existing category. Gradually, the evidence became impossible to dismiss. The skeleton represented a completely different kind of marine reptile, unlike anything alive in the modern world. Mary Anning continued searching the same coast with extraordinary skill. She discovered the first plesiosaur, the first pterosaur identified in Britain, and numerous additional ichthyosaurs that transformed scientific understanding of prehistoric life. Despite these achievements, she faced barriers that had nothing to do with ability. Women were excluded from membership in the Geological Society of London, preventing her from participating fully in the institution most responsible for studying the fossils she uncovered. Specimens she found were frequently purchased by wealthy collectors, then described in scientific papers bearing other names. A familiar phrase also became linked with her memory. The tongue twister about selling seashells by the seashore is widely believed to honor Mary Anning, reflecting the woman whose discoveries reshaped paleontology. The words themselves may wander between folklore and history, yet the deeper truth remains unchanged. Along a weathered coastline, careful eyes recognized patterns that generations before had overlooked, allowing forgotten bones to speak with their own unmistakable voice. Recognition did not bring immediate understanding. Once ichthyosaurs entered scientific literature, each new specimen seemed to answer one mystery while uncovering another. Their skeletons carried combinations of features that challenged familiar ideas about reptiles, and every attempt to fit them into established expectations revealed another assumption waiting to be overturned. Progress came gradually, carried forward by fossils that preserved details no one had expected to survive across immense stretches of time. One puzzle centered on the tail. The finest skeletons repeatedly showed the vertebral column bending sharply downward near its end. Early researchers dismissed this feature as damage that occurred after death. Burial beneath layers of sediment, they reasoned, must have twisted the bones into an unnatural shape. Since living reptiles known to science possessed straight tails, museum artists restored ichthyosaurs with long, level tails extending directly behind the body. Scientific illustrations, textbooks, and gallery displays repeated the same reconstruction for decades, giving generations an image that never truly existed. The correction arrived through fossils preserving more than bone. Rare specimens retained impressions of skin and other soft tissues surrounding the skeleton. These discoveries revealed that the downward bend formed the lower support of a tall vertical tail fin. The upper portion lacked bony reinforcement, yet its outline remained visible within the preserved soft tissue. The unusual shape transformed scientific understanding of ichthyosaur swimming. Their tails worked more like those of fast modern fishes than those of crocodiles or lizards, producing powerful forward thrust through side-to-side motion. Confusion extended beyond the tail. Enormous bones discovered at Lilstock during 1850 were catalogued as belonging to gigantic land-dwelling dinosaurs because their true identity seemed impossible. The material remained classified that way for 168 years before detailed study recognized it as part of an immense ichthyosaur, now known as Ichthyodon. The fossils had waded through generations of scientific progress before finally receiving the name that matched their remarkable origin. The eyes created another enduring puzzle. Around each eyeball rested a ring composed of many small bones, known as the sclerotic ring. Fossilization frequently scattered these delicate pieces away from their original positions, leaving researchers uncertain about their purpose. Some proposed that the bones strengthened the skull. Others imagined they protected the eye from injury during feeding. Only after studies connected eye size, orbital anatomy, and deep diving behavior did the structure reveal its true significance. The ring acted as reinforcement, helping the enormous eyeball resist pressure during descents into the dark waters far below the surface. Evidence for live birth met similar hesitation. 19th century naturalists found it difficult to imagine a reptile completing its entire life in the open ocean without returning to land. Fossils preserving embryos within the body cavity offered persuasive clues, although debate continued. Eventually, one extraordinary specimen captured the final moment of birth itself, preserving a young ichthyosaur emerging from its mother. That single discovery carried an unmistakable message no alternative explanation could accommodate. Each correction depended upon more than remarkable fossils. Every advance required scientists to expand the boundaries of their own thinking. Ichthyosaurs repeatedly demonstrated that nature could produce solutions beyond familiar categories, encouraging paleontology to replace expectation with observation and certainty with patient attention to evidence carried forward from stone. Stone has a patient way of keeping its secrets. A cliff gives way after rain, waves carry away loose sediment, and a fragment resting unnoticed for millions of years appears for the first time beneath daylight. The history of ichthyosaurs has never been a finished account. Every generation inherits a picture that feels complete until another fossil widens the frame once again, reminding paleontology that even the longest studied animals can still surprise those who search for them. During 2016, fossil enthusiast Paul de la Salle was walking the shore near Lilstock in Somerset when he noticed several enormous pieces of weathered bone scattered among ordinary rocks. Their unusual texture drew his attention, although their true identity remained uncertain. Careful examination revealed that the fragments belonged to the lower jaw of an immense ichthyosaur. What first appeared to be isolated pieces eventually proved to be part of one of the largest marine reptiles ever recognized, preserved through extraordinary chance across immense spans of geological time. 2 years later, during 2018, researchers described the specimen in the scientific journal Public Library of Science 1. Measurements of the jaw indicated an animal exceeding 25 meters, which is about 82 feet in total length. If those estimates remain accurate as additional material is recovered, the creature may represent the largest ichthyosaur presently known. A discovery that began with scattered fragments on a shoreline expanded the upper limits of how large these ocean hunters could become, reshaping ideas that had stood for decades. Fresh discoveries soon altered the opposite end of their history. During 2023, new remains recovered from Spitsbergen were published in the scientific journal Current Biology. These fossils pushed the earliest confirmed ichthyosaurs back to approximately 250 million years ago. Some researchers proposed that their ancestry may extend even earlier, perhaps reaching across the boundaries surrounding the Permian extinction itself. The implication reached beyond a single date. It suggested that the first steps of ichthyosaur evolution may have begun closer to one of Earth's greatest biological crises than previously recognized. The Somerset giant gained another chapter during 2024. The remarkable animal received the formal scientific name Ichthyodon severnensis, meaning the Titan fish lizard of the Severn. Among the authors of the research paper was Ruby Reynolds, who had been 11 years old when she discovered additional fragments of the same specimen during 2020. Her contribution echoed a familiar story from the same coastline, where a young Mary Anning transformed paleontology more than 2 centuries earlier through careful observation and determination. Another discovery arrived during 2025 from New Zealand, where researchers described a Cretaceous ichthyosaur, approximately 98 million years old. The specimen extended the documented geographic range of late surviving ichthyosaurs farther into the southern hemisphere, showing that these animals occupied regions beyond previous expectations, even during the closing chapters of their history. Together, these discoveries revise more than isolated facts. They reshape the boundaries of time, body size, geography, and evolutionary origin. Each fossil carries the possibility that another accepted certainty may yield to stronger evidence. The shoreline continues its patient work, releasing fragments from stone one season after another, while the story of ichthyosaurs remains unfinished, expanding with every careful hand that recognizes meaning within weathered bone. A skeleton can reveal the shape of an animal, yet shape is only the beginning of a living body. There are moments when the rocks preserve something far more delicate than bone, carrying traces that seem impossible after 180 million years. Among the finest examples rests within the Holzmaden Posidonia shale of Baden-Württemberg, Germany, where conditions once aligned so perfectly that entire chapters of Jurassic life remained sealed inside layers of fine sediment. That remarkable preservation began on an ancient seafloor where oxygen was scarce and disturbance remained limited. Organisms sinking into this environment were rapidly covered by exceptionally fine mud before scavengers or currents could dismantle them. Across immense spans of time, the deposits accumulated into a record unlike almost any other. Thousands of marine fossils emerged from these rocks, preserving outlines of skin, soft tissues, and structures that usually disappear long before fossilization has any opportunity to begin. One specimen of the ichthyosaur, Stenopterygius, became especially important after renewed investigation during 2018. Earlier generations had admired its complete skeleton, yet modern technology uncovered details no previous scientist could have imagined. Flexible remnants of skin still surrounded portions of the body. Distinct cellular layers remained recognizable, while molecular traces of original biological material persisted within the fossil itself. The animal had left behind evidence extending far beyond its bones, allowing researchers to study aspects of physiology once considered permanently lost. The international research team, led by Johan Lindgren of Lund University, approached the fossil with instruments unavailable when it was originally collected. High-powered spectroscopy examined the chemical composition of preserved tissues. X-ray diffraction revealed microscopic structural organization, while molecular analysis searched for surviving biological compounds hidden within the rock. These methods transformed a familiar specimen into an entirely new source of information, demonstrating that remarkable discoveries sometimes emerge from fossils resting in museum collections for generations. Among the most extraordinary findings were the preserved impressions of melanophores, the branching pigment cells responsible for producing coloration in living animals. Researchers reconstructed these microscopic structures in 3 dimensions, revealing that pigmentation varied across different regions of the body rather than forming a single uniform tone. Such evidence strengthened earlier proposals that ichthyosaurs displayed countershading with darker upper surfaces and lighter undersides. The branching form of the melanophores also suggested an additional possibility. Their structure resembled pigment cells found in certain modern fishes and cephalopods that can actively adjust aspects of skin coloration, raising the prospect that at least some ichthyosaurs possessed similar abilities. Perhaps the most debated discovery involved preserved proteins within the soft tissue itself. For many years, prevailing scientific opinion held that original organic molecules could not survive for 180 million years. Initial reports, therefore, met understandable skepticism. Continued analysis, however, provided increasingly persuasive evidence that fragments of original biological material had endured under extraordinary conditions. The finding challenged long accepted models of fossil preservation and encouraged researchers to reconsider how much information exceptionally preserved specimens might still contain. The Holzmaden fossils changed the conversation surrounding ichthyosaurs in a lasting way. Their biology could no longer be reconstructed from skeletons alone. Skin, pigmentation, cellular organization, chemistry, thermal regulation, and possible behavior entered the discussion through evidence preserved within stone. Each layer of shale demonstrated that a fossil sometimes carries more than the outline of a vanished creature. On rare occasions, it preserves part of the living animal itself, waiting until the right questions and the right tools finally meet it. The longest journeys through natural history sometimes arrive at an idea rather than a destination. Across every shoreline, every fossil bed, and every vanished sea explored along this path, the evidence has gradually pointed toward something larger than the rise and fall of a single lineage. Ichthyosaurs became one of the clearest demonstrations that evolution unfolds within boundaries shaped by the physical world itself, where possibility remains broad yet never without limits. Naturalists had already recognized convergent evolution long before ichthyosaurs revealed its full significance. Wings emerged independently in birds, bats, and pterosaurs, each lineage discovering flight through separate evolutionary histories. Complex eyes also appeared more than once, developing independently among vertebrates and cephalopods. These examples showed that similar challenges could encourage similar solutions. Even so, none displayed the remarkable degree of correspondence later uncovered between ichthyosaurs and dolphins, whose resemblance extended far beyond outward appearance. The comparison reached into physiology, coloration, and reproduction. Both lineages evolved streamlined bodies that reduced resistance while moving through open water. Both developed crescent-shaped tail fins that transformed muscular motion into sustained speed. Countershaded skin darkened the upper body while keeping the underside lighter, reducing visibility from above and below. Both abandoned egg-laying on land in favor of bearing fully developed young at sea. These similarities emerged despite an evolutionary separation of roughly 160 million years, with no marine ancestor linking the two groups. Such agreement cannot be explained through shared inheritance. The earliest ichthyosaurs descended from reptiles that returned to the ocean during the Triassic, while dolphins originated from land mammals whose ancestors entered marine environments much later. Each lineage began with different skeletons, different developmental pathways, and different evolutionary histories. Even so, countless generations gradually refined both toward nearly the same functional design. Independent beginnings arrived at strikingly similar destinations because each lineage encountered the same demands imposed by movement through open water. This realization transformed the streamlined dolphin-shaped body from an evolutionary curiosity into something approaching a physical expectation. Whenever a large, warm-blooded, air-breathing vertebrate becomes completely committed to life in the open ocean, certain solutions repeatedly emerge. Efficient swimming favors a tapered body. Stable movement favors balanced fins. Sustained speed rewards smooth surfaces and carefully distributed muscle. These features are not arbitrary artistic choices made by evolution. They reflect compromises negotiated with water, energy, gravity, and motion, each governed by enduring physical principles. The deeper implication reaches beyond marine reptiles and modern mammals. Building upon ideas explored by Stephen Jay Gould and expanded through later evolutionary research, Ichthyosaurs demonstrated that natural selection operates within channels established by physics and engineering. Evolution remains creative, producing astonishing diversity across hundreds of millions of years. Even so, creativity does not ignore the rules governing matter and motion. Those rules repeatedly guide unrelated organisms toward comparable answers whenever comparable challenges arise. Seen from this perspective, ichthyosaurs become more than spectacular inhabitants of vanished oceans. They reveal that life is neither completely unrestricted nor mechanically predetermined. Across roughly 500 million years of animal evolution, countless forms have appeared, yet certain designs return again and again because they work. The oceans did not merely host ichthyosaurs, they revealed enduring laws that shaped them, then shaped dolphins through entirely different ancestry, leaving behind one of the clearest demonstrations that evolution follows pathways written jointly by biology and the physical world. There comes a point when a fossil ceases to speak only about the creature that left it behind. The stone begins to carry a broader conversation, one that stretches beyond coastlines, beyond vanished oceans, and even beyond Earth itself. After tracing the rise, transformation, and disappearance of the ichthyosaurs, the remaining question reaches beyond paleontology. It asks whether evolution wanders without direction, or whether the living world is gently guided by rules that cannot be escaped. Convergent evolution has appeared often enough to command attention. Separate branches of life repeatedly discover wings, streamlined bodies, camera-like eyes, echolocation, and countless other solutions that emerge independently. Such patterns suggest that history is not composed entirely of chance. Circumstances differ, ancestors differ, and environments change. Yet familiar answers continue to appear whenever organisms confront similar physical demands over immense spans of time. For many years, evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould argued that history depended profoundly upon contingency. He famously wondered what might happen if the tape of life could be replayed from the beginning. His conclusion was that the outcome would almost certainly differ. Tiny events accumulating across millions of generations would redirect evolution toward unfamiliar destinations, producing a world unlike the one now known. The ichthyosaur and dolphin comparison stands among the strongest challenges ever presented to that idea. Beginning with unrelated ancestors separated by roughly 160 million years, these marine vertebrates independently approached remarkably similar bodies, similar swimming mechanics, similar reproductive strategies, and similar methods for surviving in open water. The resemblance extends beyond appearance into physiology and behavior, making the parallel unusually comprehensive within the vertebrate fossil record. Evolutionary biologist Simon Conway Morris and other researchers have interpreted such evidence differently. They propose that convergence reveals enduring constraints within evolution itself. Life remains inventive, yet invention unfolds inside boundaries established by mathematics, mechanics, chemistry, and energy. When organisms face identical problems for long enough, only a limited collection of successful designs remains available. Given sufficient time, Unrelated lineages repeatedly discover those designs because the alternatives perform less effectively. The open ocean provides one of the clearest demonstrations of this principle. Swimming efficiently through dense water while breathing air, maintaining body temperature, pursuing swift prey, and avoiding larger hunters creates a demanding combination of challenges. A streamlined body, balanced fins, powerful tail propulsion, and smooth contours satisfy those requirements with remarkable efficiency. The familiar dolphin form begins to appear less like one possibility among countless others and more like the outcome favored whenever those pressures act together across evolutionary time. Such reasoning naturally reaches beyond Earth's oceans. Every known liquid water environment follows the same physical laws. Water resists movement in predictable ways. Heat moves according to universal principles. Muscles, buoyancy, and fluid flow obey the same mathematics, whether considered here or on another distant world. If complex organisms were someday to evolve within alien seas governed by comparable conditions, convergence raises the possibility that recognizable forms might emerge there as well, shaped by the same enduring constraints. Ichthyosaurs disappeared approximately 95 million years ago, yet their legacy continues to influence one of biology's deepest conversations. Their fossils suggest that evolution is neither completely unrestricted nor entirely predetermined. It creates extraordinary diversity while traveling through channels carved by the physical universe. In that enduring balance between freedom and constraint, these long vanished swimmers continue to illuminate questions that remain wonderfully unfinished. Some spans of time are so immense that they resist ordinary imagination. They become more than measurements. They become landscapes of existence, stretching across transformations that no single mountain, ocean, or continent could ever witness from beginning to end. 157 million years belongs to that scale. It marks the documented reign of the ichthyosaurs, from their earliest confirmed appearance until the disappearance of the final representative, Platypterygius, a duration almost equal to the age of dinosaur dominance upon land. That figure gains meaning only when placed beside familiar chapters of life's history. The earliest true primates emerged approximately 55 million years ago, less than half the time ichthyosaurs occupied the oceans. Anatomically modern humans appeared roughly 300,000 years ago, a span so brief beside 157 million years that it scarcely registers on the same timeline. During the age of the ichthyosaurs, continents drifted apart, climates shifted repeatedly, sea levels rose and fell, and entire ecosystems appeared before yielding to successors. Across that extraordinary interval, these marine reptiles occupied nearly every major ocean basin known from the fossil record. Their remains have been uncovered from coastlines that now belong to Europe, Asia, North America, South America, Australia, and Antarctica. They inhabited surface waters and descended into the mesopelagic zone, reaching depths of approximately 600 meters, which is about 1,969 feet. They survived environmental upheavals, changing shorelines, and repeated climate transitions while continuously adapting to new conditions over countless generations. Success on such a scale usually leaves enduring descendants. Sharks have persisted through hundreds of millions of years, their modern representatives carrying forward an unbroken lineage. Crocodilians still patrol rivers and wetlands, preserving body plans rooted deep in prehistory. Even the dinosaurs never disappeared completely, because birds remain living members of that remarkable evolutionary branch. Each provides a visible bridge connecting the present world with distant geological ages. Ichthyosaurs offer no such bridge. Their evolutionary story closes completely. No living species preserves their inheritance through direct descent. No surviving branch carries their distinctive anatomy into the modern oceans. Their streamlined bodies, powerful tails, remarkable eyes, and marine adaptations vanish together, leaving fossils as the only testimony that such creatures ever existed. Their disappearance represents a true ending rather than a transformation into another recognizable form. That complete absence gives their history an unusual character. Standing beside the ocean today offers no opportunity to recognize an heir continuing their legacy. Dolphins resemble them through convergence, not ancestry. Large fish share portions of their habitat without sharing their origin. Every similarity belongs to independent evolution instead of family connection. The biological thread itself was severed approximately 95 million years ago and has never been tied together again. Perhaps this is why ichthyosaurs continue to hold such fascination. Their achievement was immense, extending across 157 million years of uninterrupted marine success. Yet their conclusion left no living ambassador to carry memory forward. Everything known about them has been recovered from stone, patient observation, and careful interpretation. Their revolution reshaped the oceans for longer than humanity can truly comprehend, then reached its final chapter with complete finality, leaving only the record written within Earth's oldest pages. Inheritance is often imagined as blood passed from one generation to the next, a chain that remains unbroken across time. The ichthyosaurs left no such legacy. Their lineage ended completely. Even so, they passed forward, something less visible, and perhaps more enduring. They occupied the open ocean for 157 million years, long enough to shape the ecological framework that later arrivals would enter. Across those immense ages, predators and prey adjusted to one another in an ongoing exchange. Hunting routes developed through different water layers. Schools of fish responded to pursuit with new behaviors. Fast swimmers gained advantages over slower rivals, while vision, endurance, and sensory abilities were refined through constant competition. Food webs expanded, contracted, and stabilized under the influence of marine hunters that remained among the dominant vertebrates for longer than most animal groups have existed. When ichthyosaurs disappeared, they left behind oceans already structured by countless cycles of adaptation. The creatures that eventually flourished inherited those conditions rather than creating them from the beginning. Dolphins, whales, sharks, large bony fish, and other marine predators entered ecosystems whose patterns had been shaped over immense stretches of geological time. The prey they pursued already possessed defenses forged through millions of generations. The deep scattering layers, seasonal migrations, and divisions between hunting zones near the surface and farther below had histories extending far beyond the appearance of any living marine mammal. Among those later arrivals, dolphins reveal one of the clearest echoes of the vanished rulers. Their streamlined bodies were not copied from ichthyosaurs through ancestry. Evolution reached that design independently. Blubber insulated warm bodies moving through open water. Countershading reduced visibility from above and below. Live birth allowed young to develop without returning to land. Large eyes gathered scarce light beneath the waves. Crescent-shaped tail fins converted muscular motion into efficient forward thrust. These traits emerged again because they answered the same physical demands. The pattern reaches beyond anatomy. Water resists movement according to principles that remain constant, regardless of which lineage enters the sea. Large air-breathing vertebrates face the same challenges of conserving heat, minimizing drag, locating prey, and traveling across immense distances. physics narrows the range of workable solutions. Ichthyosaurs discovered one successful combination first. Much later, dolphins arrived through an entirely separate evolutionary path and uncovered nearly the same arrangement because the ocean continued asking identical questions. In that sense, ichthyosaurs never completely departed from the modern sea. Their bodies vanished, their descendants never appeared, yet the logic they embodied remains active every day. It exists wherever streamlined hunters cross open water, wherever contrasting coloration conceals an approaching predator, wherever newborn young enter the sea, already prepared for life without a shoreline. These patterns persist because the environment continues rewarding them generation after generation. Perhaps this is the deepest inheritance they left behind. Their fossils preserve remarkable animals, while their greater legacy survives within the enduring grammar of the ocean itself. Every successful swimmer still follows principles written by hydrodynamics, energy, and survival. Dolphins did not invent that language. They learned it anew. Long before the first whale entered the sea, long before the first dolphin chased a school of fish across the open water, ichthyosaurs had already become fluent in it. Night falls across the sea without marking any boundary below the waves. A swimmer descending through the open water enters conditions that have remained faithful to the same physical rules for hundreds of millions of years. At depths between 200 kilometers, which is about 124 miles, and 1,000 kilometers, that is nearly 621 miles, below the surface, darkness becomes the defining landscape. Through that realm, streamlined bodies continue moving with outlines that would have been familiar during the reign of the ichthyosaurs. The revolution begun after the greatest extinction in Earth's history never truly disappeared. It passed from one lineage to another. Dolphins rise to breathe before slipping beneath the surface again. Their young are born tail first into open water. Blubber preserves body heat while powerful muscles drive crescent-shaped tail flukes through the sea. Large eyes gather the faintest traces of light where daylight barely reaches. None of these characteristics came from ichthyosaurs through ancestry, yet everyone emerged again because the same environment continued presenting the same demands. The ocean itself never rewrote its deepest rules. Water still resists movement with identical forces. Pressure still increases with every descent. Light still fades until vision depends on the smallest remaining traces. Air-breathing hunters still balance the need to dive deeply against the need to return for another breath. Those conditions remained constant while continents shifted, mountain ranges rose, and entire groups of animals appeared and vanished upon the land. One living diver illustrates that continuity with remarkable clarity. Sperm whales descend to around 3,000 meters, that is nearly 9,843 feet, entering darkness where sunlight never arrives. Their enormous eyes collect whatever faint illumination exists, while sound becomes their primary guide through the surrounding water. More than 150 million years earlier, Ophthalmosaurus occupied a similar world. Its gigantic eyes gathered scarce light for hunting in comparable depths, revealing that distant branches of the vertebrate family tree solved the same challenge with strikingly similar anatomy. The prey also carries echoes across time. Giant squid remain among the principal targets of deep-diving whales today. Closely related cephalopods filled Jurassic seas in extraordinary abundance, and fossil evidence strongly suggests that large ichthyosaurs hunted them as well. Predator replaced predator across geological ages, while swift tentacled animals continued drifting through the same deep waters. The participants changed, yet the relationship endured because the environment continued favoring that exchange. No monument marks the passing of those vanished marine reptiles. The ocean preserves almost nothing upon its surface. Bodies return to currents, sediments, and living communities. Atoms that once formed powerful muscles or enormous eyes entered water, plankton, fish, and countless later creatures through uninterrupted cycles. Matter continued its journey while the design that shaped it disappeared, only to emerge again within another lineage, answering familiar demands. Looking across the sea tonight means looking into a place where the governing principles have shown extraordinary consistency. The successful swimmer still requires a streamlined body, dependable warmth, efficient movement, and senses capable of working where light grows scarce. The names attached to those swimmers have changed across the ages. The underlying solutions have endured, carried forward whenever life enters the open ocean and learns, once again, the language written into the water itself. Every long story eventually arrives at a point where its scattered threads gather into one idea. This is that place. The revolution promised from the beginning was never a single moment carved into the history of Earth. It unfolded across 157 million years, revealing something larger than the rise of one remarkable group of marine reptiles. It revealed that life possesses an extraordinary capacity to discover every opportunity the world allows, filling open water, distant coastlines, great depths, and environments that once seemed beyond the reach of vertebrates. From the aftermath of the greatest extinction in Earth's history, Ichthyosaurs entered seas that had been stripped of their former rulers. Generation after generation refined bodies suited for continuous swimming. They expanded into nearly every marine habitat available to large predators. Some remained near the surface, while others descended into darkness far below. They crossed changing climates, shifting continents, rising and falling sea levels, and repeated ecological upheavals. Throughout those immense stretches of time, they demonstrated that evolution could transform land-dwelling ancestors into masters of the open ocean. Their achievement cannot be measured only by size, although some became among the largest marine reptiles ever known. It cannot be contained within the remarkable structure of their eyes, although those eyes reach dimensions unmatched among vertebrates. Neither can it be understood only through their astonishing longevity, extending across 157 million years, while entire ecosystems appeared and vanished around them. Those qualities remain extraordinary, yet each points toward a deeper principle that extends beyond the animals themselves. The lasting revolution lies within the evidence they left behind. Independent evolutionary lineages, separated by immense spans of time and sharing no marine ancestor, arrived at strikingly similar solutions. Streamlined bodies, insulating layers beneath the skin, live birth in open water, powerful crescent-shaped tails, large eyes adapted for dim conditions, and efficient long-distance swimming emerged more than once because the same physical world continued presenting the same challenges. The resemblance was never a coincidence preserved by chance. It reflected the persistent influence of hydrodynamics, temperature, pressure, and the demands of survival in open water. Today, no living creature carries ichthyosaur ancestry. Their branch ended completely, leaving no descendants to continue their name. What remains rests within cliffs overlooking distant shores, where bone became stone and impressions of skin endured inside finely layered shale. Fragments overlooked for generations waited until patient observation revealed their significance. Every fossil stands as a page rescued from an immense history that otherwise would have disappeared beneath the tides of time. Even so, Their absence is incomplete. Descend through the sea until daylight fades, reaching 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, where familiar colors disappear into blue shadow. There, streamlined hunters continue passing through the water with forms shaped by the same enduring laws. The lineage has changed, while the principles have remained. The revolution, therefore, continues without interruption. Its first architects vanished long ago, yet the patterns they revealed remain active wherever large air-breathing vertebrates return to the sea. Life keeps discovering those same enduring solutions because the ocean continues asking the same enduring questions, and the answers remain written into the water itself.